Today I'm going to be talking to you about the remote copy feature in Syncrify. First, I'm going to give you a small demo showing how to use this feature, and then we'll talk about some pros and cons of using this feature. So let's see how Syncrify behaves, first without this option and then with this option enabled. In this example, I am backing up a couple folders with a few files. One of the folders is about 1 GB in size. If the end user decides to rename this folder, Syncrify will treat the renamed folder as a new folder and therefore will transfer the entire folder again. Similarly, if I copy a large file from one folder to another, Syncrify will transfer the copied version of the file in its entirety again. To demonstrate, I'm going to copy a file and paste it to a different folder. To make the example a little bit more interesting, I'm going to rename the file. Next, I run a backup. I see it takes about a minute to transfer this file. Now let's see what happens when we enable the remote copy option. First, I check the remote copy option under the Advanced tab. An important fact to keep in mind is that this option does not work right after changing the settings. That's because it requires a special database containing MD5 signatures, which is created once a backup is complete. So let's run a backup, which will create the necessary signature database. Now, I'm going to do the same test again. I copy the same file to a different folder and change its name. Finally, I run a backup. I see that the backup finished significantly quicker and no data was transferred. The log indicates remote copy with 0 bytes. In the background, Syncrify was able to detect that a user copied the same file to a different location and therefore simply performed a similar operation on the destination, rather than transferring the entire file again over the network. Now, let's talk about some pros and cons. Advantages are obvious. First, you could potentially save significant work traffic. It also works when files are copied or renamed, and it also works even if you rename a folder or move files in between folders. As far as disadvantages go, this feature saves you network traffic that comes at a cost of a local disk I/O and CPU. It requires a local database containing MD5 signatures of every file, which needs extra CPU and disk I/O for maintenance. The size of this MD5 signature and database is currently proportional to the number of files rather than individual file sizes, meaning the more files you have, the bigger the database will become. Additionally, this database is specific to a top-level folder. In other words, copied files are only detected if they are moved within the same profile and same top-level folder. And last but not least, this option requires additional memory. You may see out-of-memory errors on file structures that have millions of files. This memory constraint is more prevalent on 32-bit machines than 64-bit. Understanding the cost versus benefit for this feature is important before using it. As a rule of thumb, don't use this feature if you have too many small files. For example, it would be beneficial if you're backing up millions of images that are no more than a few megabytes in size. Moreover, this is no benefit if you do not anticipate frequent file renames or copies on the source machine. On the other hand, use this feature if you're working with large files but fewer in numbers. For example, enable this feature if your dataset has around 10,000 files and most of them are around 500 megabytes or larger.